The Pittsburgh Steelers have made many roster changes within the last few days. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they signed 2 players to their active 53-man roster. They released 2 players from their main roster, but also signed 2 more to their practice squad and release 2 more from their practice squad. But first, before I get more into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also like this video. Now, let's get right back into it. So, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is their Week 11 roster update and every transaction they made during the week. So, let's start off with the additions to the 53-man roster. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've activated linebacker Tyler Matakevich and wide receiver Ben Skonik to their active roster. What does this mean? Well, Tyler Matakevich, he was already on the 53-man roster to start the season, so this isn't really a new addition to it. He got injured, so he's placed on injury reserve, and now that he's off of it and activated, he goes back to the 53-man roster. So this isn't a new addition there, but it is a new addition in wide receiver Ben Skonik, because he was on the practice squad to start the season. He was not on the main roster. He did play in a few games this season. He even played last week, but this is not a new addition to the team, but this is a new addition to their active roster because he was on the practice squad, but now he's actually signed to the active 53-man roster. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, they activated both those players off of injury reserve, and now they're on the main roster. And in corresponding moves, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have to release 2 players to open up some spots for those guys. And the players that they released were running back Jonathan Ward, who they just signed to their active roster a week ago, and they've also released safety Terrell Edmonds from the 53-man roster. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, they clear up space on the roster to sign those guys, and unfortunately those are the guys that they have to let go. Now, let's look at the other signings before I get more into those ones. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they've signed wide receiver Jamal Agnew and running back Jonathan Ward back to the practice squad. So even though they released Jonathan Ward, they sent him back to the practice squad. And a new addition to the practice squad is Jamal Agnew because he has not been on the Pittsburgh Steelers before. So in a corresponding move on the practice squad, you have to release 2 players from there since those are 2 new additions. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, they release offensive tackle, offensive guard John LeGlue, and wide receiver Lance McCutcheon. So John LeGlue is a player who's been on the Pittsburgh Steelers in the past, been on the practice squad, and he's now released from it. He's played in many games a few years ago. He actually started some games, but now he's off of the team just in general, and Lance McCutcheon is off of the team as well. So, unfortunately, to add those guys to the practice squad, those are the guys that had to get cut from it. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, these are all their transactions made in Week 11. Now we can get more into the nitty-gritty and talk about each one individually. So now let's go all the way back to the 2 activations and signings to the 53-man roster. Because looking at Tyler Matakevich and Ben Skonik, they've come back to this team. And Matakevich, he was placed on injury reserve list after suffering a hamstring injury against the Denver Broncos in Week 2. And Ben, he was placed on the list that game after it as well. Matakevich, he returned to practice on October 24th, while Ben, he returned on November 6th. And the Steelers had a 21-day window to either activate them to the 53-man roster, or they would have had to remain on injury reserve list all season long. So, Matakevich, he recorded 2 special teams tackles this season prior to his injury, indicated when he returned to practice how good he felt, and also said how much he has missed being on the field. And now he's back. Matakevich, he was selected by the Steelers in the 7th round of the 2016 NFL Draft, signed a 1-year contract with the Steelers in mid-July this offseason. He spent his first 4 seasons in the NFL with the Steelers, the last 4 seasons in Buffalo with the Bills. And for his career, Matakevich appeared in 131 games, starting 1, so he's more of just a special teamser, not really a defensive player. He has 134 tackles, including 97 solo stops, 4 pass defense, and 1 interception. So Tyler Medikevich, he returns from that hamstring injury, and more than likely, since he did play in this last week's game, he will help the team on special teams. Not really the defensive side of the ball, but they signed him for special teams this offseason, so they know what he brings to the table, and that's what he's going to continue to bring to the table. And that's why he's still on the 53-man roster. Usually someone who's just a pure special teamser won't make the team unless they're really, really good at their job. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, consider really, really good at his job. And that's why he continues to get a job around the NFL, and that's why the Steelers brought him back. Looking at Ben now, Ben Schnowick, I believe I'm saying his name wrong, but he began the season on the practice squad, like I said, and was elevated for Week 1 game against the Atlanta Falcons and Week 2 against the Denver Broncos. But then after that game, he was placed on the injury reserve list on September 18th. Ben, he was originally drafted by the Los Angeles Rams in the 7th round of the 2021 NFL Draft, the 249th overall pick. He appeared in 45 games for the Rams, starting 12 while pulling up 58 receptions for 575 yards in his career with them. He was then traded to the Houston Texans this offseason, but then he was let go from them. So he now appears with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He played at college football at Northwestern before transferring to Notre Dame for his final college season. While at Notre Dame, he played in 11 games, finishing 29 receptions, 439 yards, 5 touchdowns. 2 of those touchdowns came against the University of Pittsburgh at Acrisure Stadium, when he finished the game with 2 receptions for 107 yards. Both touchdowns, 1 for 34 and a 73-yarder. So now, Ben Schnowick, he is now on the Pittsburgh Steelers active 53-man roster. Not just the practice squad anymore. He gets a little bit more real job security, knowing he has a chance to play every single week, and you just don't have to wait to be elevated to game day from the practice squad. So he's on the 53-man roster, and this is a new addition to it. And like I said, the Steelers had to release players. They released Jonathan Ward and Terrell Edmonds. The reason why Jonathan Ward was even on the active roster was because Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, those players were really the only active, healthy running backs. And even then, Jalen Warren was kind of banged up. So the Pittsburgh Steelers signed Jonathan Ward while Cordell Patterson was also injured, just in case of if you need another running back, he could do it. But since those players are all back now, all 3 of those running backs are back, there's no need for Jonathan Ward. He's not going to be another special teamser where someone that could only play special teams, because it's a backfield offense at the running back position. So he's released from the team, and that makes sense. Safety Terrell Edmonds, like I said, was also released. This one's a little bit surprising because he has been with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the past. He's been a really good player for the Steelers in terms of special teams, playing everywhere on defense, whether that's high safety, whether that's in the box, whether that's in the slot. He's been doing that his whole career. He did that with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the past, and he was also doing that with the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. So that's a little bit surprising, but I guess with Cameron Sutton back as well, they have really no need for him at the slot position. You don't really want to play a safety in the box. You could just play a linebacker there, unless you're looking for more coverage, but even then, Patrick Queen is supposed to be your coverage guy along with Peyton Wilson, so that doesn't really make sense. And then you already have safeties like DeMonte KZ, who go back Minka Fitzpatrick up, and you also have Elliott as well, who's a really good safety. So I guess the Pittsburgh Steelers decided to part ways with him because there's no need for him on the roster anymore. But Terrell Edmonds, he's a tough, gritty player. I'm sure we'll see him on the Pittsburgh Steelers again sometime in his career. So, moving over to the practice squad now, enough with the 53-man roster. Jamal Agnew is a player who was signed to the practice squad. He's a really fast player. He's still someone who's not a big in size. So, Calvin Austin was dealing with like a head injury to end last week's game. So, this could have been a player that was brought to the practice squad. So, just in case if Calvin Austin couldn't go, he could have been elevated to the main roster. But Calvin Austin looks fine, so Agnew is just now on the practice squad. But he's a speedy player. Catch him up to speed, and he could be a player that could be utilized in the future. Who knows? But also, running back Jonathan Ward, after released from the Steelers roster, was signed back to the practice squad, another speedster. And in a corresponding move, John LeGlue, who was a big part of the Steelers team a few years ago, when players got injured, he did a really good job stepping in. But It's been years past, and now he's released on the practice squad, in which he signed to the practice squad like last week, I believe. Wide receiver Lance McCutcheon was also released. I don't have too much on those guys, but these are the additions, these are the subtractions to the Pittsburgh Steelers team in general, whether that be their main roster or not their main roster. This is all the moves they made in week 11, all the transactions. So, with that being said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on each one of these. On wide receiver Ben Schnowick finally getting a chance on the 53-man roster, along with Tyler Medikevich coming back from IR as well. How do you think those guys will impact the Steelers moving forward? I know that they already played in this past week's game, but this was the moves they made for week 11. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about those, and also the release and the cuttings, the waves of Jonathan Ward, Terrell Edmonds, and also the practice squad additions and subtractions as well. Do you believe they're good? Not good? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports. Everything regarding Pittsburgh Steelers, I cover it. So, stay tuned to the channel, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you guys all later. I'm out. Peace.